Good evening, everyone. I'm James Rhodes, Pitt County Planning Director. We're glad that you were able to get online tonight and participate in the Zoom meeting, as well as those that might be viewing otherwise. So again, I'll change this over to our presiding Vice Chairman tonight, Brad Goof, to call us to order.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. I wanted to welcome everybody to the Pitt County Planning Board meeting on Wednesday, May 20th, 2020. And I would like to take a moment to welcome Mr. Fred Austin to the Planning Board. He's a new member. He was with us last week, but is joining us as a voting member tonight. And then I'll turn it back over to Mr. Rhodes to call the roll, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Fred Austin.
Here.
Faye Barefoot. Faye Barefoot. Ms. Faye, we'll come back to you. I know you're online somewhere. Don Brown.
Here, James.
Here.
Okay, thank you. I heard you, Mr. Brown. Thank you. Naomi Buck. David Davenport.
Here.
Brad Guth.
Here.
The chairman, Mr. RJ Hemby, is unable to attend tonight. Steve Little.
Here.
Tucker Moore.
Here.
Maria Rogerson.
Here.
Danny Smith. And Mr. Smith did advise us late this afternoon that he most likely would be unable to attend as well. Mr. Vice Chair, we do have a quorum, so we're ready to move forward with the agenda.
All right, thank you. If you could all have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Rhodes, if you'd lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I'll be glad to. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and
to
to
the
the
republic
republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we can move on with the agenda. The next item is the approval of the minutes.
Everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes. If so, I'd appreciate a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Little has made the motion to approve, and I believe Ms. Rogerson has seconded that motion.
Thank you.
Do we need to do a roll call vote for the approval or just voice
Yes,
acclamation?
We'll go through the roll call vote. Mr. Austin, for the minutes, approval of the minutes.
Approve.
Ms. Barefoot? Ms. Faye?
Yes.
Don Brown?
Yes.
David Davenport?
Yes.
Brad Guth?
Yes.
Steve Little?
Yes.
Tucker Moore?
Yes.
Maria Rogerson?
Yes.
That's unanimous, Mr. Vice Chair. So we're ready to move forward.
Okay, thank you. We've got Mr. Bryant, I believe, is going to address item number 5 on our agenda, is the development review for the farm.
And Mr. Vice Chair, you might also want to first ask if there are any public addresses to the
I'm
board.
sorry, I skipped the public address to the board, item number 4. Yes, are there any public members of the public that would like to comment?
And just for those that are dialing in or online for some of the discussion concerning the subdivision plans, there are opportunities to discuss that after each one of those individual items. So I know we have one hand raised, and we could go ahead and call on that person if we'd like to, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bass?
Hey, yeah, I think I had more in the way of questions. So if that was what he was referring to as wait until later, that's fine. But just questions about the plans of development of the farm across on County Home.
Okay, well, we're gonna have go through that process now. If you'd like to wait till after the staff and the developer has made their presentations, we can get your questions then.
Okay, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jason will come up now, then Mr. Vice Chair, and proceed on with those development review plans. Thank you.
Vote. You star and your 9.
Evening, Board. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. First up for development review, we have the farm preliminary plan. This site is located on County Home Road, south of its intersection with Jack Jones Road. It's in the Winterville Township. It's 24 lots, 48.22 acres. The owner is Cherry Construction Company. This is an aerial view of the site to give you orientation. This is a closer look. This is the plan submitted. Portion of this property is located in a 100-year flood zone. Site is zoned rural residential. That's 25,000 minimum lot size. One new street is proposed. Electricity by Greenville Utilities Commission, water by Eastern Pines Water Corporation. The comments that Pitt County Planning had is that a portion of this is in the 100-year flood zone and will require a floodplain development permit if development is desired in that portion. We have several comments concerning lot size, meeting the 25,000 minimum square footage. Also, some other zoning issues, minimum lot width of 100 must be measured at the minimum building line, and open space will be required per the Pitt County subdivision ordinance. They will also need to add a landscape buffer per the Pitt County subdivision ordinance. And a stub out road is required to parcel 35435 or 35436 due to the adjacent parcel being greater than 10 acres and the two parcels are in the same ownership. Septic systems must be approved prior to final plat approval. And Pitt County Engineering has requested easements for stormwater pipes for appropriate maintenance. And a cluster box unit should be on its own parcel deeded to the homeowners association. And special purpose lots do not need to meet minimum lot size standards. Greenville Utilities has requested electrical easements. And for these electrical easements to coincide with the right of way in various locations. NCDOT would like to require 25 by 25 right of way or public utility easement triangle on both sides of the intersection with County Home and Waltz Way. Driveway permits and encroachment agreements will be required. This is a view of the site at the intersection of County Home and Jack Jones Road. This is a view of road frontage of the site along County Home Road facing south. This is a view of the adjacent property to the south, looking across the proposed site. This is a view of the parcels across from the site on County Home Road facing north. And this is a view of the current site conditions. The Technical Review Committee has recommended approval, conditional approval. Adjacent property owners have been notified and staff has received phone calls and emails in regards to the proposed development. Comments and questions have been interest in general design and location of the entrance, landscaping berm, and stormwater. First letter we have received. Hi, Jason. With regards to the meeting on May 20th, we have some concerns we would like to hear discussed. We know that Cherry Construction builds nice homes, so we are thankful for that, but still we came to NC and purchased property in this area to be away from traffic and closed neighborhoods. We are concerned about the entrance and turning traffic in and out of our driveways and their driveways. We have 2 new drivers and an elderly driver in our household, and our concern is that they can safely come and go. In addition, we choose this property location for the beautiful aesthetics we enjoy, such as privacy, wildlife, and sunrises, and we need to know these amenities will not be affected. The water retention basin next to our home gets fairly full with a good rain, and by building a neighborhood with 24 houses, that creates more runoff into the drainage ditch, which then flows into the ditch by our house and into Fork Swamp Creek that runs behind us, which would increase water levels. We are having a pool built in the back of our property, and we don't want to have drainage or structural issues. We ask that you please understand that we all moved out into the country for space and privacy, and to consider that privacy when designing ways to preserve it as naturally as possible. This should include the placement of the entrance to the neighborhood so that it is not directly across from anyone's driveway. Thank you for your utmost consideration for these concerns. Looking forward to hearing the discussion and some ideas. The South family. Our consulting has submitted on May 19th, 2020, new information regarding the recommended conditions for construction of a stub-out street to the adjacent parcel south. This email was provided to the planning board earlier. This is the stub-out requirements per the Pitt County subdivision ordinance. And most importantly, the stub-out roads to adjacent properties shall be required except when one of the following is applicable: zoning less than 10 acres, or where existing residential road networks do not have sub connections available, and roads are dedicated as private. And more importantly, the first item, the stub road will require crossing protected water features, or the stub road will provide access to the property, to properties permanently protected from development through encumbrance, such as a conservation easement, conservation trust, or deed restriction which prohibits development. And now we'll hear public comment to the board.
And Mr. Vice Chair, we have some folks that have already indicated they'd like to speak on this particular item. So if you'd like, I can go ahead through that listing and have them speak. And just as a reminder, the speaking limit is for 3 minutes. Unless you're speaking for a group of people, it can be extended up to 5 minutes. And that's all at the discretion of the chair tonight. So, Mr. Chair, would you like me to move forward with calling the individuals' names?
Let's see if there's anybody on the board that has any questions for Mr. Bryant or any of the conditions and the requirements that we're asking of, and then we'll move forward with the questions, if that's okay.
Very good.
So
Are
in
there
the, So in this, Mr. Vice Chairman, just curious, I hope in this discussion that we'll address some of the concerns about this, from the South family. And James, do you think that'll be addressed in this discussion?
It can be. I will tell you, the Department of Transportation has already reviewed this plan, has already made recommendations. Again, there will be very limited driveways, driveway permits issued on this property. I believe there's one for the road going into the development and one other driveway that's being permitted onto county home roads. So there will be very few, only a couple that I'm aware of, driveways that would be part of this development plan. That would be one. The stormwater, you may recall we had a in-depth discussion last month concerning stormwater regulations. In cases like this, where there is new development going in, stormwater plan is required. What the state requirements allow for is that the runoff cannot be increased any more than 10%. And a lot of times with the roadside ditches, again, we've got a proposed public street going into this development. Sometimes those roadway ditches actually help to keep the stormwater runoff on site a bit longer, and therefore it's a negligible amount, if any, increase that goes off site. So those were two of the main things that I think the South family were concerned about.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any other questions about the conditions and requirements or the concerns brought up by the neighbors from the planning board members?
Are we going to address the email that we received today, or is someone going to speak about that beforehand?
Yes, that needs to be addressed. It certainly does, Maria. In fact, I think a couple of the speakers I'll go ahead and let you know from staff's perspective, the recommendation for a stub out still stands, and our interpretation of the section of the street requirements, we don't see a way to provide an exception for this stub out, given the criteria. So it's really up to the board to consider the information that's being provided. We apologize that it got to you so late, but we do have both the developer and the engineer online tonight to provide you some additional insight, but you're exactly right. This item will need to be addressed as part of the motion for this development plan. And we're
Okay.
happy to entertain any specific questions you might have about it, but I think it would be appropriate maybe to let the developer and his agent talk about it a little bit first.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other questions about the conditions or requirements from the board at this point? If not, we'll go ahead and let the other folks speak, and then we can discuss after we hear from them.
Okay, Mr. Chair. First, I have Beatty Bass.
Yeah, it's Beatty. That's correct. Yeah, I'm a neighbor as well. So kind of speaking on behalf of Grayfield, which is 5 families across the road. The South family is one of those families. I would have voiced the same main concern, just being out here a little over a year, and reasons we came out, privacy and that kind of thing. Really, I think what we'd request there would be a berm, like a landscape berm or something. So coming down county home or looking out across our front yard, you wouldn't see a neighborhood, per se, houses on top of each other. The biggest concern I would echo is the runoff. I heard you mention, 10% increase. Our house in particular is furthest off the road, so we are the closest to Fork Swamp. And the woods behind us, the drainage ditches that all run towards Fork Swamp, pretty good rain, 2-3 inches. The woods do fill up with water. It gets out of there pretty quickly, but it does flash flood pretty quickly as well. So that's kind of a major concern, is how much thought planning, engineering goes into helping reduce and increase runoff? Are there plans for a retention pond? Does something like that even help? Can the drainage ditches be, increased to carry more, or, have a larger capacity? Stuff outside of really what I would understand, but those are our big concerns.
Okay, Mr. Vice Chair, I'll just briefly go over a couple of things associated with what was just mentioned. The landscaping berm is required. You may remember that we did update our subdivision regulations to require a berm along a state maintained road such as County Home Road. So that will be part of the development plan. You'll see more details about that when the construction plan comes on. Similarly, the construction plan will also include any stormwater best management practices. That could include whatever features are necessary to make sure the site is in compliance with the stormwater regulations. So I won't stand here and say that it will actually be decreased with the amount of runoff at any given storm, but it will be minimal. And we just happen to have the engineer responsible for this project that also is going to speak. He may want to address that item a little bit further since we have yet to see the stormwater plan. So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to move on to the engineer. That's BryanFagundus for the farm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Mr. Chairman, I'm BryanFagundus. Represent Mr. Cherry on this project. I'm with Art Consulting Group. We're a civil engineering firm in Greenville. So starting, I guess, at the beginning of this, real briefly, the comments that came out of the TRC review, all of those comments are being addressed. Most of them have already been addressed on paper and will be addressed, especially at the time of construction plan submittal. Staying on topic with Mr. Bass's concerns relative to landscape easements or berms and aesthetics, appearance, without a doubt, there will be an attractive landscape berm feature, if you will, across the road frontage of this property. There'll be an entrance feature at the primary street at Walks Way turning into the subdivision. So in terms of aesthetics, one, it's a county requirement, but two, Mr. Cherry always does a really good job with aesthetics on his project. So that will be installed as part of this project. Driveway locations, street locations, those were vetted very early on, even going back into a sketch plan phase for the project with the district office at the Department of Transportation to make sure that since we are connecting the County Home Road, that the DOT was comfortable with what we were looking at doing, and we had some back and forth with the district office on doing that, and that's what's reflected on this plan, that they were also involved in the TRC review of this plan before it went to you guys. Stormwater, so the county does have a stormwater management ordinance that regulates two different components in stormwater runoff. One is we regulate the nutrients that leave a site. And secondly, we regulate the volume of water that leaves a site. And the way that the ordinance is written on a development like this, we are not allowed by ordinance that actually comes down by virtue of state law. We're not allowed to export over a certain threshold in nutrients, and we're not allowed to exceed the existing runoff conditions of what you see today. The good news, and James alluded to it a little bit, the good news is when you traditionally convert row crop agricultural fields to larger residential lots that range from, say, a half an acre to, in this case, 6 acres plus, when you convert that row crop into managed lawn and landscaped area, the runoff rates decrease. So in terms of the stormwater plan with the preliminary plat, we did submit calculations for both runoff and nutrients that were reviewed by the county at that point. this site does in fact generate less runoff in its post-development conditions, so after the homes are built, by virtue of converting that raw ag land into maintained lawn area. So from a stormwater perspective, the canal that is the primary drainage outlet for this property that flows under County Home and ultimately into Fork Swamp, Mr. Bryant mentioned a small section of floodplain. That floodplain follows the culvert underneath County Home Road and just barely touches this property. But then as you go back towards Fork Swamp, in the woods Mr. Bass described, that's where that floodplain really opens up, and then Fork Swamp has a regulatory floodway associated with it as well. So our expectation is this property follows more or less natural drainage patterns for what it's doing today. The roadway water at the back of the road at the cul-de-sac, there is an inlet that will daylight into the existing canal. And that canal is, by the way, maintained by the Pitt County Drainage Corporation. So our length of travel for that water runoff coming off that half of the road is about as far away from County Home as we can get, and it will have to migrate through that Drainage Corporation canal back to County Home. So a good portion of it does take a longer route than what it does today. But at the end of the day, we actually anticipate a little bit less runoff than what's there today. Certainly a raw ag field runs off in a fairly quick way if you've ever stood and watched rain come through crop rows. So from a stormwater perspective, we're in compliance with state and county regs in that. And we don't want to cause any more downstream flooding, especially in the Fork Swamp Swift Creek watershed. So if we had felt like that those numbers were telling us something different, we'd have addressed it differently as well. And I'm sure county staff would have felt the same way, not wanting to speak for them, but that'd be my assumption for those guys as well. The piece of information that you guys probably have had the least amount of discussion on is the email information that I sent Mr. Bryant late last night, and I apologize for the tardiness on that. We actually have been working since this time last month to try to get meetings set up with the adjacent landowner to our south to discuss interconnectivity and to discuss the street stub. And quite frankly, with COVID and all the things that we're all doing differently, this style meeting included, that was a pretty good monkey wrench in trying to set up meetings in a small way with those neighbors. So we were finally able to meet with them, garner their permission for a soil scientist to do some legwork on the property, because we wanted to better understand what the existing soil conditions were on that property and understand what its potential realistically for development could be. Because the concern we had was, yes, we want interconnectivity and yes, we want to provide it. The concern was there may be a better way to achieve the same ends. So we received the soils information, and I gave a summary in that email to a couple of different ways to provide connectivity to that property to our south. You guys in that email should have also had two attachments that were sketch plan drawings. Option one showed a stub coming from the farm property. That stub was shown in a light blue color. And then a potential lot layout based on the soils on that property to the south, potential lot layout based on soil suitability. You yield about 4 lots to the south of the Drainage Corporation canal. Option two, much the same thing. But what it does is show the parcel 19,565, which is again, one more additional to the south. It shows a potential connection from that property, providing connectivity back up to the parcel in question that we're talking about. The advantage to option two, as opposed to option one, is sheerly the amount of street and the amount of infrastructure that it would take to provide the same connectivity back to County Home for that landlocked parcel. So our process in that was really meet with the landowners, garner their permission for us to be on their property to do soils investigations, then evaluate it and come up with what we felt like was achieving the same goal, just through a different ends. So parcel 19,565 in option 2, there would be a road that would come from that parcel into this parcel. And 19,565 already has dedicated access out to county home that all expectations is that farm developed, if and when it does, that's where that access would come from. So the end of the day short answer is, can a connection from the farm be provided? That answer is yes. The premium to doing that is a couple of $100,000 in roadway cost to pick up substantially 4 lots that could be picked up for much lesser cost to someone later. You really end up with 2 different effects from that. One is the farm lots, all of a sudden their cost goes up. That's the point. The major component to this is in meeting with the existing owners and the Strong family members of the parcel to our south that we're talking about providing access to. They're not very keen on having this access at all either. This property is in their family, has been in their family. They don't have any intentions for it, or not looking at selling or developing. It is active farmland. So they had concerns if a stub were to be built and providing essentially somewhere for people to congregate in their minds that they may not otherwise congregate in that location. With the financial breakdown that it takes to provide feasible developable lots on the Strong parcel, with their desire to not do anything with that parcel for development, I really think that interconnectivity makes a lot of sense. But I think in this case, I think it makes more sense to come from the south back to the Strong parcel instead of coming through the farm. One of the constraints with the farm, and one of the constraints that will be in existence if the Strong property were to ever develop, is the Drainage Corporation lateral, and our unwillingness and Mr. Vanderford's extreme hesitation, I'll call it, to want us to punch a public street across that easement and provide another public street impediment across that drainage canal. So what the farm is proposing are limited residential driveways to cross that canal. And that's what the expectation would be on the Strong property as well, if the far eastern portion of that property, kind of north and east of the canal, if it were to develop. So I hope that I've helped explain some of that. That is very difficult to do in this setting. So if I have thoroughly confused you, I'm glad to talk through it as much as you guys would like to. And if y'all have questions, and if I have omitted or left anything out, I'm certainly glad to try to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fagundus. Are there any questions from board members for Mr. Fagundus about the options that he's asking for? That would be a change to the conditions that the staff is recommending. So if anybody has any questions about those things before we make a motion, I'd encourage you to ask.
Well, I guess the motion would include the best option, right? So I guess when we look at staff, what is considered the best option?
Well, the staff can speak to this, but as my understanding is that they believe that a stub out is required. And Mr. Rhodes, could you speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. And probably also, if we could get the screen up, this if you haven't had an opportunity to actually see what was presented by Mr. Fagundus, this is the first option. If you can look at the screen now, he mentioned earlier, this is the proposed subdivision street, Waltz Way coming into the farm subdivision. What we as staff have reviewed and feel like is required by the ordinance is that there be a stub out to the southern property right here. And this would be the connection if that was developed hypothetically for the new part of the development on that tract. On the green line is another proposed subdivision, hypothetical subdivision in the future. And you can see this is applying our current interconnectivity requirements would require this stub to also connect in. So what you'd have is a free-flowing street network outside of County Home Road. What Mr. Fagundus was just speaking to is that they would prefer not to have this stub out coming from the proposed subdivision, the farm, but only having the access come from the other parcel here south of the one that we are proposing the stub out go to. So thought the pictures might show that a little bit better than just the discussion. So going back to the subdivision requirements, Jason and myself have looked at those based on the information that's provided. And remember, you've got a very objective, technical subdivision ordinance, and there's not much, if any, flexibility in there by design. So if these plans meet the requirements, they're approved or conditionally approved. Based on our review of the street section, specifically the street interconnectivity part, we don't see a way to provide an exception for this stub out. In other words, we believe it is required, but we have that information available on the PowerPoint tonight. Be glad to re-review those sections for you to see if the board might have a different interpretation than staff. And Jason already has kind of mentioned that previously. It is under Section 5B, and those criteria there, those 6 criteria, are ones that would allow exceptions or exemptions from the street interconnectivity or stub out requirements. And based on our review, we don't see what's been provided so far. We don't see where that provides compelling information to grant this exception. So with that, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, we still believe that the conditions and requirements that have been set forth in your agenda package, which include the street stub out, we still believe that should be a requirement for this development. We also have another speaker too, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Let's listen to our next speaker.
Okay, Mr. Joey Cherry.
Mr. Cherry? Mr. Cherry, you're free to go ahead.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I was aware of the stub out rulings and what the county preferred. The issue that I was looking at, because I was considering of trying to purchase the land to the south of it and possibly consider developing that as well. But the economics and so forth only make it feasible if they ever wanted to sell it. And after talking with them, I know that they didn't want to stub out street either, but would have to come from the south to make it even feasible for somebody to go in there and try to develop. So needless to say, I understand the reasoning. I just thought this would be possibly an exception, because I don't think that even if they wanted to sell it, I don't even think they could give it away, to be honest with you, and make it a desirable piece of land for a developer, because he'd be going backward from the start. So I think it's probably a moot point that that land will be developed, certainly anytime in my lifetime and beyond. But I wanted to talk to you guys and just see if there was a way that would be considered, because it just made so much more sense to Brian and I coming from the south, and was something that would be feasible. Coming from our property, it's just totally unfeasible. So I understand the ruling. It's just, in this is a case that will never work. Not the way it stands without, coming from the south and involving more than one farm. So I guess, Brian pretty much summed it up. I appreciate the consideration. I sense where it's heading. I wish it was different. But that's really all I can say. And thank you for your time. We will certainly make it nice no matter what we do. It will be an enhancement for the county. I can assure you that.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr. Cherry. Are there any questions from the board for Mr. Cherry? All right. Well, do I hear, is there any other discussion or questions about this? Do I hear any motions in terms of the approval process that the staff has put forward for us?
I move that we grant conditional approval under the criteria that is under the recommendations of the staff.
If I want to speak, I do star 9.
Is that Faye?
Yes.
Do you have something you'd like to share?
No, I was just saying I would second his motion.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Little to approve for a conditional approval with the conditions and requirements put forth by the planning staff, and a second by Mrs. Barefoot. Mr. Rhodes, can we do a roll call vote for the?
Yes, sir. This is for conditional approval for the farm preliminary plat, based on the conditions and requirements. Mr. Fred Austin.
I approve.
Okay. Ms. Faye Barefoot.
Approve.
Mr. Brown.
I approve.
Mr. Davenport.
I vote yes.
Mr. Guth.
Yes.
Mr. Little.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mrs. Rogerson.
Yes.
Okay, that's a unanimous decision. Mr. Chair, Jason's back up again.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Turnberry preliminary plan. This is located on Ivy Road, north of its intersection with Mobley's Bridge Road in the Grimesland Township. This is 46 lots, 63.7 acres. Owner is Bill Clark Homes of Greenville. This is an aerial of the site. This is a further zoomed in location. This is the preliminary plan submitted. This site is zoned rural residential. Minimum 25,000 square foot lot size. 3 new streets are proposed. Electricity is Greenville Utilities Commission. Water service by Eastern Pines Water Corporation. Pitt County Planning's conditions and requirements. All BMPs must meet the requirements of the Pitt County Stormwater Ordinance. Require a 40-foot minimum building line on those lots that have double frontage along Ivy Road. Mailbox cluster unit must be located on a lot deeded to the homeowners association. Again, a special purpose lot is not subject to minimum lot standards. Must add designation of proposed streets as public or private. Show a riparian buffer along the ditch on lots 40 through 43, along the rear property lines of lots 14 through 18. The road name Turnberry Drive was denied. It was too similar to Turnberry Drive in Greenville and must be renamed. Septic systems must be approved prior to final plat approval. NCDOT requires the non-access easement to be placed along lots 1, 2, 42 through 46 along the NCDOT right-of-way. Access to the cemetery on lot 44 may remain. Connection to existing water lines should be constructed to not have valves within proposed pavement sections or invade one-on-one slopes from end of pavement. Additional right-of-way or public utility easement should be placed at the street connection to Ivy Road and any other intersection. NCDOT driveway permits and encroachments will be required. Water lines should be constructed within 5 foot or less of the right-of-way line, as with any utility installed. There's a Piedmont natural gas permanent easement within this plan. NCDOT will need recorded right-of-way specific to this area. NCDOT recognizes this easement and has no concerns with its placement in the proposed NCDOT right-of-way. NCDOT would like the engineer to be mindful of NCDOT's requirements for utility crossings within NCDOT right-of-way, and the roadway design should be such that Piedmont natural gas facilities are expressly protected for design and during construction activities. Eastern Pines request to show water line for the permanent hammerhead on construction plan submittal. Emergency Management and Greenville Utilities Commissions approved this plan. This is a view of the proposed site in Ivy Road facing south. This is a view looking down Ivy Road facing north. This is a view of adjacent property west of development across Ivy Road. This is a view of the parcel located directly across Ivy Road facing north. And this is a view of the development site from Ivy Road showing its current site conditions. The technical review committee recommends conditional approval. Adjacent property owners have been notified and staff has received 1 letter and a phone call concerning the development of this site. The phone call was interested in the number of lots and how to contact the developer if they were interested in purchasing a lot. The first adjacent property owner. Jason, we are the owners of parcel 48474 across the road from parcel 48471, and my family is concerned about the development of this land. Reference the attached aerial photo, possibly from around 1930. My father has told us of an old cemetery on the family farm, which he remembers seeing tall wooden markers as a child. The photo supports that there was most likely a cemetery there, as why else would a small wooded area be surrounded by farmland? This area may not be disturbed by the development, but could end up in someone's backyard unknowingly to the homeowner. This area would most likely be the graves of previous landowners or possibly even slaves prior to 1874. We would like all parties to be aware of this, as this could impact the plan design by the developer and how the particular area is treated. We also have following concerns which may be most likely addressed. Where will the development entrance be? How will the developer address the graveyard at the road? We were informed a landscape berm would be installed around its perimeter. What are the size of lots and homes? I'm copying the Historical Society on this and hope that this message will be passed along to Bill Kittrell, who has performed some cemetery mapping, as he may have some input on how old, unmarked, and unregistered grave sites are treated. Respectfully, Richard Tucker. And now public comment to the board.
And Mr. Chair, we do have some people that are registered to speak tonight, and including Mr. Tucker, who's on the line that Jason just read the letter from. So if you'd like, we can go ahead and call on those individuals, or if you'd like to go with the board first.
Yeah, let's ask the board if they have any questions regarding the conditions and requirements that Jason went through. Okay, I'm not hearing any feedback from board members and questions, so we'll go forth with the
Okay, the first speaker we have is Mr. Richard Tucker. Mr. Tucker.
see him on my list. There we go.
Okay, I didn't unmute, sorry about that.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily want to make a speech or say anything.
Okay,
I just wanted to be having phone access in the event I wanted to speak or say something.
all right,
But at this time, I don't have any comment.
perfect. Thank you, Mr. Tucker.
Mr. Chair, we also have Landon Weaver representing Bill Clark Homes on the line as well.
Okay. Mr. Weaver,
Yes, hello, Chair, Vice Chair, and Board. We've got a subdivision that we're proposing that meets all the requirements. We're going to build nice homes there. It's in the Chicago School District, which is very well. Jason, after tomorrow, I'm gonna call you and try to get the information of the person who wanted the lot. That's a great testament of probably how well this subdivision is going to do. It's a very sought out area. They're going to be very nice lots, well sized, well priced to do well in that school district in that part of the county. So we feel like we've met all the requirements. We've discussed with, again, DOT, Eastern Pines, county staff, and have really tried to do everything that everybody sees fit on this project. We will have landscaping along the front. We do plan on screening the cemetery as well, while giving access to those folks for visiting the cemetery as well. So they'll still maintain access to that. Regarding Mr. Tucker's assertion that there potentially may be some unmarked graves out there on our property, we'll follow any required laws or ordinances regarding that. We have done some investigation on our own as well, and we have seen no evidence of any graves through history, through any documentation, or on site with any kind of markings or any kind of depressions. I actually owned a property in southern Edgecombe County, right here at southern at Pitt and Edgecombe for several years, and I had some of those graves on that property that I owned, and you could definitely tell there are depressions in those older graves. Haven't seen anything like that, but we will investigate further and look into it to make sure that we're not selling somebody something that we don't feel confident in. So we'll treat it as the law requires and the ordinance requires, and we're here for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Weaver? All right, well, hearing none, do I hear a motion? I'm sorry, let's back up. Mr. Rhodes, are there any other
Yeah, we do also have the project engineer, Richie Brown with Stroud Engineering also on the
Okay.
line.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Mr. Brown.
Good evening. Going to reiterate on a couple things that Mr. Bryant's already talked about. One of the comments we had was a designation of the roads being public versus private. These will be DOT streets with ditch sections. And due to the lower density of this development, the pre and post runoff calculations dictate that no stormwater attenuation is required. And also that we are not over the threshold for nutrient export from the site. Just wanted to throw those two out there and be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Board have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, that was our last speaker for this particular development plan also.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion from the board regarding the conditional approval of the preliminary plat for Turnberry?
I move we grant conditional approval.
Mr. Little has made the motion. Do I hear?
Second, Brown.
I heard a second. Who was?
Don Brown.
Don Brown. Thank you, Mr. Brown. So, Mr. Rhodes, would you care to do a roll call for us, please?
I will. Mr. Alston, yay or nay?
I will say yay.
Ms. Faye Barefoot,
Yes.
Don Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Davenport,
Yes.
Mr. Guth,
Yes.
Mr. Little,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
and Mrs. Rogerson.
Yes.
That's unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
And
thank you.
Jason, Jason's
board.
back up.
Hello.
Next up, we have Woodbriar preliminary plan. This site is located north of the intersection of J.C. Galloway Road and Blackjack Grimesland Road. It's in the Grimesland Township. This is 14 lots, 36.8 acres, and owner is PB Builders. It's an aerial view of the site. This review here. This is the preliminary plan submitted. The site is zoned rural residential, minimum 25,000 square foot lot size. No new streets are proposed. Electricity is Greenville Utilities Commission. Water service is Eastern Pines Water. Conditions and requirements. Pitt County planning is to add statement located within 1/2 mile of a voluntary agricultural district. NCDOT, a non-access easement should be placed along the right-of-way of lots 10 and 11 from the proposed driveways towards the center of the intersection on each. Driveway permits and encroachment agreements should be submitted as required. Driveways have been pre-approved for the designated locations and should not be relocated. Greenville Utilities has requested, based on the proposed home sites and septic locations, to have electric easements. Pitt County Environmental Health septic systems must be approved prior to final plat approval. Emergency management approves this plan. This is a view of the site from J.C. Galloway Road facing southeast towards Blackjack Grimesland Road. This is a view of the current condition from J.C. Galloway Road from its intersection with Blackjack Grimesland Road. This is a view looking down Blackjack Grimesland Road to the northeast, also at the intersection. This is a view of the site facing north. View of the property across J.C. Galloway Road. This is a view of the property across Blackjack Grimesland Road. Technical Review Committee recommends conditional approval. Adjacent property owners have been notified, and staff has received a call and a letter from adjacent property owners concerning the development. The owner of parcel 40167 is concerned about water runoff from the site. They are concerned additional water that drains along their southern property line to Cow Swamp and behind their property will lead to flooding. During most rainfall events, they experience some flooding that can be seen in their backyard. The property owner would like additional drainage to be considered along the common property line. Another letter that we received from adjacent properties owners, Ernest and Elizabeth Palmer, located at 1663 Blackjack Grimesland Road. We would like to levy our comments and concerns for the proposed subdivision of parcel 40550, located at the intersection of J.C. Galloway and Blackjack Grimesland Road as follows. Egress, ingress. The parcel in question is located on heavily traveled roads, which consist of dangerous vision curves. Both roads contain curves near proposed subdivision. Safety. In addition, these roads currently have proposed speed of 55 miles per hour. If the requested 14 homes are built, there would be an average of approximately 28 vehicles going in and out of development, which would present a danger to those turning in and out of said roads due to the lack of vision and the high rate of speed. In addition, over the past several years, we've experienced no less than 5 vehicle accidents in front of our house on Blackjack Grimesland Road, in part due to the 2 curves in these roads. We feel there is no safe access to proposed parcel from either road. Road conditions. Both roads bordering proposed development are currently in poor condition. Example, potholes, tar patches, and poor surfaces. With the increased traffic, this would only further deteriorate the road conditions. Fire safety. There is currently a broken fire hydrant located on Blackjack Grimesland Road, located on the proposed subdivision and across the street from my house. It has been broken and serviceable for over a year, leaving my home at risk in the event of a fire. Pitt County and the fire department have informed me that they are not in agreement as who has to pay for the damaged hydrant. Therefore, no conclusion to remedy, leaving all homes in this area at risk. In conclusion, we strongly believe this proposal is not in the best welfare of current area residents due to above outlined concerns. Thank you in advance for your prompt review of this very important matter. Ernest and Elizabeth Palmer. Public comment to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Are there any questions from the planning board about the conditions and requirements or any of the adjacent property owner comments? All right, hearing none, I guess we will move forward with any comments.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have 2 people registered to speak. The first one is Gwen Smith.
Ms. Smith?
Hello? Hello?
Is this Ms. Smith?
This is, I own the property with Ms. Smith.
Okay.
1569 Blackjack Grimesland Road.
Are you Mr. Gibbs?
Yeah, I'm Mr. Gibbs.
Okay, Mr. Gibbs, go ahead.
In the past, that we own the property, we own 2 parcels there, a house, and I have we have a dog pen there. I have over 20 hunting dogs down there, and I have had to walk in waist deep water to get my dogs out of the pen because of the blue line ditch that runs behind the property. And with the amount of runoff that we have coming from the area where this property is being proposed to be built, we've had a flooding issue to come across Black Grimesland Road, not just from the Blue Line ditch, but we've had flooding from both sides, and it meets in the middle. And if you come through there with the traffic, that it's a blind area. We've even had folks run into the house. The cars have hit the house. And if you add that many more properties to that area, the runoff is going to be tremendous, and the swamp cannot handle it. Just as it is now with that Blue Line ditch, the way it is, it floods. And if the tree limbs get it caught in the culverts, it backs up and it floods from probably east of the house, maybe 100 yards back towards the J.C. Galloway area. And it doesn't take a whole lot. This kind of rain we have right now has been known to flood it. I've got videos, pictures of our driveway being washed out by flooding coming across the road. And I don't know how a development there will benefit the current property owners. And now you're adding the Clark property, and that's not too far, and all of this stuff trickles down to the Cow Swamp, and then hits that Blue Line ditch to go into the Tar River. At some point, when you keep adding properties out this way, we're gonna end up living on stilts out there.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Are there any questions for Mr. Gibbs from the board? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if Ms. Smith is not on the line, that was the only speaker we had for this particular development plan.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the board?
I have one.
Okay, Ms. Rogerson.
The only question, I don't see any topos on this map. Is there going to be anything addressed concerning drainage? I mean, without seeing any topography and seeing how it lays, I'm assuming it's just going to either shed off to the back to the creek, or it's going to the road.
A couple of things I will show you, Ms. Rogerson. If you notice the shaded area that's adjacent to the creek, and this on the northern side, the shaded area is all regulated wetlands. It's a wooded area. It will be protected. So you can tell almost, if not a third, at least a quarter of the entire development tract will be pretty much untouched. It's regulated wetlands. So we've already mentioned there's not a new road going into the subdivision. These are all road front lots. They have been vetted through DOT. Driveways have been strategically placed along those existing state roads. So at this time, there will be some runoff from the driveways and the rooftops, but these are some very large lots. The actual lay of the land out there, most of it, of course, is tilted towards, drains towards the creek. Some of it also is absorbed by the roadside ditches along the state roads there. So at this point, there is not a requirement for a stormwater plan, given that there's no new impervious surfaces being developed as part of this. These will be on individual lots. So therefore, there's really at this point no regulation of that stormwater from this particular site.
Okay. Any plans for what that common area is supposed to be?
No, you may recall we've mentioned a little bit about the landscaping requirements. That was a recent amendment to our subdivision ordinance. We also have an area that would be left open as part of the open space. They've listed it as common area, but this will be open, undeveloped property. So again, paired with the wetland area, this common area would also remain undeveloped.
Okay. That answers my questions.
Okay. Are there any other questions from board members? Hearing none, do I hear a motion regarding the conditional approval of the preliminary plan for Woodbriar?
Motion,
A second.
Barefoot? And did I hear Ms. Rogerson second?
Yes.
All right.
Sorry, was that Ms. Faye that made the motion?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Okay, we'll do roll call now. This is for conditional approval of the preliminary plat for Woodbriar. Fred Austin,
Approved.
Ms. Faye Barefoot,
yes.
Don Brown,
Yes.
David Davenport,
Yes.
Brad Guth,
Yes.
Steve Little,
Yes.
Tucker Moore,
Yes.
Maria Rogerson.
Yes.
That was unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So moving on, I believe you're on the agenda for us next with planning matters, Mr. Rhodes.
Yes, I am. I'm going to try to speed through some of these, but I do need a recommendation from the planning board on this first item. So most of you are familiar with, and those that have been on the board for a while may have even been involved with our previous update of our hazard mitigation plan. We've been really developing these types of plans since Hurricane Floyd some 20 years ago. So we're quite experienced with this. We've had some very good success in implementing these plans. The county's even won an award for this. But these plans are only good for 5 years, and our existing plan is just about to sunset. It will next month. And we're kind of going at this a little bit differently than normal, given the review process through the state and also FEMA. It's going to take a little bit of time. The state has advised us that we need to go ahead and move this through the review process here so our plan does not lapse. Just a couple of ideas as to why this is important to keep an active plan. Without a valid plan in place, the county is not eligible for FEMA funding. And that's a big part of what we in our office are involved with, especially through the buyout programs and things of that sort, and through other public assistance programs. We definitely need to keep this in place. So let's talk a little bit about the hazard mitigation plan. Again, this is to protect our community from not only flooding, but a lot of different natural disasters. I've mentioned we've been at this for a while. This is actually our 5th time of developing and hopefully approving a hazard mitigation plan. We've gone from a single county plan to county with a few municipalities. Now we're at a regional approach. So it's Pitt County along with the counties of Greene, Lenore, Wayne, and Jones County. And these are counties that were selected by the state to be involved with our program here. And this is our 2nd time in developing a regional plan. That's the map that kind of shows the area we're dealing with. But each one of these communities, it's not only the counties, but each one of the municipalities within these communities or counties also are part of this planning effort. So our update, we've been involved for quite a while, had a number of meetings. I'll tell you, if you've had an opportunity to go online and view the plan, it is a whopping 540 pages long. There's a lot of information that's required, a lot of data that's included, maps and so forth. It is a very in-depth plan. So our main goals, not surprisingly, is promote public health, safety, and welfare, reduce the risk and impact of future natural disasters, and pursue funds to reduce those risks. Main goals, effectively expedite post-disaster reconstruction. Our office has been involved with that a number of times, especially after the flooding events. Also provide education to citizens and also protect our natural and scenic areas. A lot of information included, but I will tell you, whether you're in North Carolina or you're out in California, you the federal government requires you to look at all these different types of disasters. So yes, we had to also look at earthquake possibilities, flooding we're aware of, severe weather, and even tsunamis. That's part of this review. Our mitigation strategies, we're looking at prevention, protection, natural resource protection, our emergency services, how they're provided, and public information and outreach. So
All right, last night.
at the end of the day, we're trying to make sure we're implementing plans. These are where these strategies come into play. We have some 20 priorities, 20 strategies that we need to look at over the next upcoming 5 years. A lot of these are carryovers. One that I'll just mention on the first screen, continue to impose a 2-foot freeboard requirement. That is an extra protection for those properties that are developed within the 100-year floodplain. It requires that these structures are elevated an additional 2 foot above base flood. Just today, our new flood damage prevention ordinance went into effect. That 2-foot freeboard requirement is still in place, along with some newly revised floodplain maps. I'm going to skip on through. There's quite a few here. We do have a couple of new strategies, one that our office has been actively involved with. One is to identify a location for and establish a special medical needs shelter. We have a special medical needs shelter in the county. It is very outdated. It may not be large enough for the population we're serving. So we recognize this is a need for our community. Also, there was another plan that has been developed as part of the aftermath of Hurricane Matthew. It's called a Resilient Redevelopment Plan. And this hazard mitigation plan also references it and requests or suggests that we implement that plan as well. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's a brief run through of what was included in about 540 pages down to about 5 slides, but we would like a recommendation from our planning board. We know you've been involved with different aspects of this. We talk about this with some of our development plans, how to reduce some of the impacts. So what we're looking for is a favorable recommendation from the board tonight to carry forward to the commissioners when they consider this plan on June the 1st. Mr. Chair.
So you're asking for a recommendation for approval of the plan?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board for Mr. Rhodes about the plan? This is the Neuse River Basin Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan. All right, hearing no questions, do I hear a motion that we, going forward?
I move that we grant the approval for recommendation or recommendation for approval.
I
Right.
second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Little, and I believe Ms. Faye Barefoot seconded that. So if you would like to go roll call vote.
Okay, this is for a recommendation for favorable consideration of the hazard mitigation plan by the Board of County Commissioners. Mr. Fred Austin.
Approve?
Ms. Barefoot,
Yes, approve.
Don Brown,
Yes, approve.
David Davenport,
Yes.
Brad Guth,
Yes.
Mr. Little,
Yes.
Tucker Moore,
Yes.
Maria Rogerson.
Yes.
That was unanimous, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Now you
Just a
have-
few others, brief updates, just to bring you a little bit more insight onto what's going on with the 43 South plan. And again, we appreciate, we've got a number of members that are serving on this committee. We're looking at continuing on with this development process over the next few months. And what we have, and we want the viewing public especially, to consider going online. We now have a survey that's available. It's listed on the slide in front of you. or you can go through our county website and go through the planning department's webpage and also link to this site. It is a survey to get more information from the people that travel that area or may have property in the NC 43 South area. So during the last month or so, we have developed a draft study area along the corridor, and this map just shows that. And just as a refresher, the 43 South plan will encompass the corridor starting at Bell's Fork at the very northern end, going southward through Hollywood's Crossroads near D.H. Conley High School. Also, there's a area towards the east along Mills Road where there's been some recently annexed property. That's also included in this particular study area. Heading southward down 43, it will also go just a bit south of the Chicad intersection. So that's the complete corridor alignment. A lot of new development in that area. You have been involved with some rezonings in that area over the past couple of years. We see only increased development in this area, primarily because sanitary sewer is now available to a large portion of this. So our next steps, we're in the process of reviewing plans with our consultant. We're hoping to hold a working group meeting on June 24th and conduct a public input session. We don't know exactly how that might look during the virus situation that we're currently in, but we're continuing on with our development process. So again, we encourage everyone to go online, fill out the survey, and let us know if you have any questions. And as always, Mr. Chair, members, we've got to say a little bit about Census 2020. Just know that the efforts to complete this particular effort for this year have been delayed a little. Basically, they have received a 120-day, 4-month delay in meeting some of the requirements that were spelled out earlier. The Census Bureau is very concerned about the safety of the citizens as well as those workers that have been brought on to help with the enumeration process. So just some dates here. People that have not responded to the census survey will be getting doors knocked on very soon if they do not go on and self-report. So if the enumerators are out in the field, if you want to avoid having someone come to your door, please go online and fill out your census forms. Also, as I've mentioned, some of the dates have been extended. The apportionment counts you can see have been extended into 2021. Typically, all these census activities are wrapped up by the end of this calendar year. They're extending into 2021 now, including when this information is delivered to the president and also some of the redistricting data. So it's not only at the federal level, it's at the state level, it's at the local level. All these local governments will also have to consider this new census data and adjust their voting districts accordingly. And just as a reminder, go online to www.2020census.gov, click the green button if you haven't already, and fill out your census form. Even if you have not, or you've misplaced your form that had a specific ID for you to enter, you can fill this form out based on your physical address for your property. And just so you if you want to know how we're stacking up against other communities, here in Pitt County, we are lagging a little bit behind both the state and the national response rates. We're right at 53% as of earlier this week. But you can see our response rates vary around the county and communities, ranging from Falkland at only 12% and Winterville all the way close to 70%. And there's some reasons why some of these communities, especially your Fountains and Falklands and Bethels, are a little bit lower than normal. Those people that pick up their mail from the post office boxes did not receive notices about the census. So in turn, if they are not using their E911 address, more than likely they could, the only two ways they can respond is waiting for the enumerator to come by or call the Census Bureau. They will also take your information by phone. That phone number is available on our website as well. We do have an active complete count committee, and we plan to meet in a couple of weeks just to try to strategize a bit more as to how to promote this while people are moving around a little bit less frequently. And Mr. Chair, I will not go through all the details of the informational items. They're in your package for your information. Also, always want to direct the general public to our Pitt County website if they need additional information, or if they have some of the information that we provided tonight they're interested in, they can always go online there and either find out contact information for the staff or look that information up online. That's all we have for tonight, Mr. Chair. Welcome
Okay,
any questions.
Mr. Rhodes. Guess the only thing left for us to do at this point is to adjourn. Do I hear a motion for adjourn?
So moved.
All right.
So moved, Don Brown.
We'll do that by voice acclamation that we're adjourned.
Thank you, guys.
Adjourn.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.